Before we continue on with the investigation of the 12 spies, let us read from the Zohar, who makes an attempt to present an understanding as to why did these 12 people, and these 12 people incidentally were the leaders of their respective tribes, and why and for what reason did they come back with a report which was not only erroneous, but as we have learned, was Lashon Hara. What was the purpose? So I quote from the Zohar in Parshot Shlach Lecha, page 12, Seif, paragraph 30, Lamed. Vayishlach otam Moshe kulam anashim. Hainu shekulam hayu tzadikim v'roshei Yisrael hayu. So it doesn't merely is not liberal with his adjectives, and here he says that they were tzadikim, and they were, as we said before, leaders of Israel. Aval heim natlu la'atzmam etzara. But they took to themselves, or they drew, or they connected with bad advice. Lama natlu etzazu. And what was this? And for what reason did they take or go in this direction of what is referred to as evil, Ra? Ela sha'amru. And again, let us not forget that the word Ra in the Torah, the word evil, is not the kind of expression that we commonly use for good or evil, but evil meaning the aspect of absolute illusion. Elisha Amru, they said, Im yikansu Yisrael la'aretz, if all the Jews shall enter the land of Israel, yavru otanum liyot roshim, we'll then lose our jobs. You might have thought I was telling a joke all along about, this friend of mine who approached his Reform rabbi and said, Rabbi, what happens when the Messiah comes? He says, I'll be out of a job. But actually, he didn't even realize he was quoting a Zohar. And these people who were chieftains and leaders of the tribes were afraid that when they entered the land of Israel, they no longer would retain their position as leaders of the tribe. But if that wasn't bad enough, continues the Zohar, Umoshe yimna roshim acherim, but that Moses was going to appoint other 12 tribes. In other words, the rabbi was wrong. The job would still be a job, right? The job of rabbi would still continue even after the Messiah came. However, it says here that aside from losing their jobs, Moses would appoint others in their place. For we have merited to be the leaders of the tribe of Israel only in the desert, in the Midbar. Aval ba'aretz lo nizke liot roshim. But when it comes to the land of Israel, there we do not merit to become leaders. Ba'al shanatla eitze ra la'atzmam metu. Hem v'kol elu shekiblu divrehem. And everyone died, because following the report of the 12 spies, it was then decreed in this portion of Shlach Lecha that all Jews, all male over the age of 20, would have to perish in the wilderness. They could not enter the land of Israel. So let us explore for a moment the seemingly contradiction of the Zohar. First, he says they were all tzaddikim and leaders, and yet they felt that they would not retain that position, and therefore they came back with an evil report. I mean, that just simply doesn't sound logical. If the Zohar calls them tzaddikim, then how could they possibly connect with Eitzer Ra? How can they connect with an evil thought or an evil instruction that they might lose their position? And why did they furthermore consider the possibility of losing that position upon entering Israel? What difference did it make whether they were chieftains in the wilderness or chieftains in the land of Israel? Why would Moses suddenly decide that the time came for a change? But as we pointed out before, for whatever reason, Moses felt that these people, these 12 chieftains, would have to go to Israel, and they would determine if there is the tree of life reality, the real reality, or the evil and the good and evil reality of the Etz Hadat, the tree of knowledge. Why only there in Israel? Why there would there suddenly be the realization that these people were going to choose one or the other? What about in the Midbar? What about in the desert? Couldn't Moses tell if they were going to retain and maintain this consciousness of Eitz HaChaim, the reality level? Remember our question, the question we raised in the Torah? It says Moses sent these spies so that he would know whether he would enter the land of Israel, whether these people would retain a level of consciousness of Eitz HaChaim, the reality level, or would they succumb, or would they fall into what we call the mud of the physical reality level? Couldn't he tell that outside the land of Israel? What was the necessity of going into Israel? And furthermore, to make things a little more complicated, not that that is my intention, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, and the Zohar continues, Rabbi Isaac said, Moshe histakel v'yada shelo yatzlichu hamaraglim. Moses knew in advance, because Jack raised that question, did he know or didn't he know? And the answer is, where is Jack? He's there. Okay. Don't want you to get lost, Jack. And it says, furthermore, that Moses knew that they were not going to be successful. He knew. Bidarkam. And so what did he do? He took the only alternative that was available for him, continues the Zohar, Az hitpalel al Yehoshua. And then he prayed for Yoshua. We discussed that he instilled with him part of his consciousness. And that's why it says to the tribe of Ephraim, it does not say the tribe of Joseph, as it says by Livnei Menashe, right? The other son, the verse adds the words Livnei Menashe, Livnei Yosef, right? Lemate Yosef, Lemate Menashe. As if we didn't know that Menashe replaced Yosef. But he says only Menashe here in this case was the incarnation, as other sages in the Zohar consider, as an incarnation of Joseph within Menashe. And Lemate Ephraim, where it does not say Livnei Yosef, Ephraim was the second son of Yosef. And the verse in verse 8 of chapter 13 does not specifically repeat, as it does in verse 11, Lemate Yosef. Wasn't Ephraim also the son of Joseph? So the Zohar says, no. Here is to indicate that Yoshua underwent a transformation. He was the leader of Ephraim, but here another aspect of consciousness entered Yehoshua, whose name was Hosea, and he instilled through the power of the Yud. Moshe used the Yud as that channel for his transferring of his own level of consciousness to Hosea, who became Yehoshua, the addition of the Yud, because the Yud was used as the method of transferring this kind of energy, and therefore he was no longer Lamate Yosef, he was no longer connected completely with the tribe of Joseph. Not that Ephraim or Yehoshua cancel out his connection with Joseph, the tribe of Joseph. But the verse in its coded form, wants to enlighten us with the aspect that Yehoshua became instilled with this consciousness of Moshe, and therefore it only says Lamate Ephraim and not Lamate Yosef. And therefore that came about because Moshe was Itpalel al Yehoshua. He prayed. What does it mean? He prayed for him. I don't want to go into prayer because within this Parsha, which I may or may not have time to read, where there always seems to indicate to us that most people, and you imagine this is 2,000 years ago, are we to assume that most people who attend the Bet HaKnesset or attend the temple know what they're doing there? Imagine in the time of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, he says that most people who walk into a Bet HaKnesset don't know what they're doing there. Now, are we to assume that we are more enlightened than that age of Rabbi Shimon? They didn't know the purpose of what they were doing there in the Bet HaKnesset. But in any event, he prayed. What does it mean? He prayed, connecting with consciousness, connecting with energy, connecting with the force of the Creator. This is what he means that he prayed for him. You know, you could pray for an individual that he get better. But according to Rabbi Shimon, the fact that you may say Tehillim, I don't want to cancel it out completely, that I leave to Rabbi Shimon. He seems to cancel out completely that when you just merely pray for somebody, and that's all you do, you open up, let's say, a Tehillim, the book of Psalms, which is used for prayer, and you say, I'm praying for this individual. Most times, or more times than none, and from all of our own personal experiences, not always has the individual been helped. Why not? Because, says the Zohar, we don't know how to pray. We don't know how to pray. But what do you mean you don't know how to pray? Does it mean you don't know how to pronounce the words correctly? Does it mean you don't know how to read? No, says the Zohar. You don't know what this prayer is all about. The fact that you may know how to read and the fact that you may know the translation of the word is not called prayer. It is what you are connecting with and using the words as channels for drawing energy. So when you pray for someone, you've got to know which chapter, which section of Tehillim, and know how to make use of Tehillim in transferring of energy to, let's say, an ill person that you want to assist, you want to support him. You can only support him not with the words, but only with energy. That's what's lacking in an ill person. So the Zohar says most people in his days did not, I say most, he didn't say some, he said most people who enter a Bet HaKnesset do not know what they're doing there. But he was Jewish, remember. So when Moshe was mitpalel for Yoshua, it says that he used the letter Yud for the purpose of transferring part of his energy, and therefore his name became Yehoshua. Hayas Kalev Batsara, the other fellow, who came back also with a good report. Remember, there were two who came back with a positive report, and he was from the Mate Yehuda, Kalev ben Yefuneh. He realized that Yehoshua had been instilled with an aspect of Moses' intelligence. However, what about himself? How would he not succumb to the evil report? And so what happened, says the Zohar? Amama said, what am I going to do? Hare Yehoshua holech be'ezrat elyona shel Moshe. Yehoshua is proceeding on with these other 10 chieftains who were known in advance, as the Zohar said before. Let us not forget that. Were known that they would come back with an evil report. But, said Kalev, he has the support, the supporting energy intelligence of Moshe. That will push him through and pull him through. Sheshalach bo or halavana shia malchut v'hu eir ala bitfilato. And Moses transferred that light through his prayer onto Yehoshua. Why? And here is the secret. Why could Moshe do something like that? Shu bechinat hashemesh. He was in that level of consciousness known as the sun. Shehu ze'ir ampin. What does that mean? Sun has one characteristic. If we were to define sun and ask all peoples of the world, including the Greeks and Greek mythology, what was the sun about? It transferred energy. Nothing could exist without energy of the sun. Consequently, everyone understood, even in Greek mythology, that the sun had this one particular characteristic of sharing. And so we learn that when Moses prayed, he just didn't open up a Tehillim, which didn't exist in written form as yet, but he didn't merely say a prayer, so to speak. Say a prayer for me is a common expression when someone is ill or needs some support or assistance. But that Moshe was in a position of son. He was in a position of what? Of sharing. Moses was, as we said, Moshe anav mo'ish, anav ma'od. He was a humble person, which we say the Zohar explains, not as merely a man of humility, but he was a man that exemplified and demonstrated the force of the Lord. And the force of the Lord means what? Sharing. When Moshe or anybody else is in that frame of reference, wanting to share. Now, who doesn't pray, meaning he wants to pray for the well-being of the individual? Isn't he sharing? So why does Rabbi Shimon say people who go into a synagogue, say a prayer at the kotel, or wherever, or whichever, why aren't these people helped? And the answer is, because when he prays, he's saying, Hashem, help. But what has he done? He has left out the channel, meaning himself. Hashem can't come down directly, because if he could come down directly, then why do we have all the problems in the world? But because of an old concept of B'Reth Hashem, we ask the Creator, look, don't interfere too much. Permit us free will. Stay on the sidelines. Stay in the wings. Give us a chance. Give us a chance, meaning all of us. So the Creator, by and within himself, cannot heal directly. He must use channels, the same way as we discussed in the first section of our discussion this evening, was why he used Lavan, why he would use Eliezer, why he would use Yitro, why he would use Bilam. Because these people could be the proper channel. So when Moshe was praying for Yehoshua, he was connecting with that force. And since he represented and symbolized the aspect of sharing, he could connect with this. But he was connecting with the force and saying to the force, discussing it with the force, I would like to share. Permit me. That's what the tefillah is all about. Permit me to be your channel, because light cannot come direct. If it came direct, it would burn out the individual totally. So it's got to come through a diffused, somewhat diluted channel, which in this case was Moshe, or in the case of the other individuals, There could not be that raw, naked energy that comes in contact with the individual. So how does that reach the individual? By the prayer, if it's an ill person. However, the person who is uttering that prayer has to have the consciousness of what is he doing. He's saying a prayer for someone. But if he doesn't know the elemental factor involved, that he is a channel for energy, and he hasn't requested that energy to pass through him, and he would connect with the individual via the prayer, nothing happened. It's like dialing on your telephone, connecting, but not talking. You're connected. Everything is go, except one thing. You're not talking. You're not saying anything. That's how simple it was. So Moshe was the son. What does it mean he was the son? He was a total channel for the force. That's what it means. He was Ishanav. When he spoke, says the Zohar, Moses didn't speak. The force spoke, not Moses. There was no I. So if anyone is praying for someone who needs assistance, as long as that individual, or to the extent that the I of the individual is ever present, and with a Jew, that's something we all have to work on. But if that individual is still thinking about the I, but why not say a prayer for my mother or my father or my brothers? But he himself is in a frame of reference of I, forget it. That's why they run to tzaddikim. Why do you run to tzaddikim? They also don't. Well, they figure he can help out better. He can only help out to the extent, if he is a tzaddik, it means one aspect. He is shemesh, he is ampin, he's sun. Meaning, he has an affinity with the force. The force is sharing, the light is sharing, this individual is sharing, so he's made the proper connection. The words then take that energy, and channel it onto that person. And also you have to know which words. Not every perek, not every chapter in Tehillim is suitable for everything. So you see many people just pray and say Tehillim. They may not even be making use of the proper chapter dealing with the particular situation. Because not every situation where support is necessary or needed is always the same. Someone may need parnasah, someone may need health, someone may need a better relationship between man and woman. I mean, there are so many things that come in the form of deficiency or lack in this universe, all different, diverse, that you just can't say, I'll say Tehillim, and therefore it's going to help. Got to be very specific.
When somebody becomes a channel for prayer, don't they first, like Moshe, doesn't he first have the desire to draw it down, have the desire to receive, to draw down the energy, and then bring it over?
That was the part that the Zohar said. That Moshe first said, let me act as a channel.
So there is an me, an I.
For the sake of sharing.
As a channel for the sake of sharing.
Right, but to start the
Not
switch,
for me.
No, but to start the switch,
No,
the I has to
no, not there. Draw it for him. And I know you can't send down raw naked energy because you know raw naked electricity serves no purpose, right? A live wire. No one can make any use of. It's got to be insulated. It's got to be covered, concealed for it to make manifest. So he prayed for him. But Kalev said, what about me? Ma asa Kalev. So what did Kalev do? Ishbat mehem, he separated from them. From the other 10, min amraglim, ubar al kivrei avot vitpalel sham tfilato. He went to the Hebron, and there he prayed. What was his prayer about? Again, the same thing as the center does twice a month when they visit these people, our good friends, the real good friends. No question about them being good friends. They're not alive, so they're real good friends. That's who he took advantage of, right? Yoshua took advantage of the one fellow that he could trust, and that was Moshe. But Caleb did not feel that affinity. There wasn't that affinity. All right? So he went to Keva Avot. Because these two knew in advance. How do we know? Because the Zohar and all of the commentaries knew that Moshe instilled within Yoshua the Yud in advance. What was the problem? Here he was sending tzaddikim, as the Zohar himself declares. These the leaders of the tribes were tzaddikim, and yet Moshe instilled within these people what? What? The power of himself into Yoshua. Because he knew in advance. Then why did he send them? Why did he send them? If he knew they were going to fail, why did he send them? And furthermore, if they were tzaddikim, how could they arrive? I mean, this is all of the usual discrepancies in the coded message of the Torah. Therefore, the Zohar in Beha'alotcha, which we have just read, which we have just discussed, in this portion of Beha'alotcha, let's return to the question of why they thought that when they came to Israel, they would be removed from their position as leaders of the tribe. And in the Midbar, the desert, that was all right. But it all ties in with what has been explained up until now. And we have our answer. It's like we know about the Jews when they're outside of Israel. Not too much problems. Oh, they go high wire, and they can mess up things in Spain, and they can mess up things in other countries. But it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier. Jews somehow do not express themselves with the ugliness that is part of our intrinsic characteristic as they do in Israel. In fact, the country itself, the 40 years of Israel, bears it out. I mean, within 40 years, things are not really going so well. Because it's a lot more difficult when you're using the channel of Israel or land of Israel. Now, we know why it's called the land of Israel, not because God promised that land to Israel, is not the reason why it's called the land of Israel. The Arabs only knew that, boy. Then they really have material with what to work. I mean, if they hear Rabbi Berg say that it is not called the land of Israel because of the promise, because there was never a promise. Never a promise. Maybe we shouldn't tape it. But they might be disappointed about what I'm going to say afterwards. They were not promised the land of Israel. What is referred to, says the Zohar, and again, if he can say it, maybe that's why we're not permitted to study Kabbalah. He reveals too much of the truth. It's a problem, maybe. But he says the reason it's called the land of Israel is because that land of Israel is the energy center of naked energy. It is so powerful that if those who connect with that power station and are not fully insulated, are not fully prepared, or cannot deal with that kind of naked raw energy, it'll burn them out. It'll burn them out. Therefore, as we know the Zohar has said on many occasions, all of these empires had nothing else to do as a pastime is to come try to capture this little country called Israel. Roman Empire, Greek Empire, Persian Empire, you name it, they've all been there. Had nothing else to do? No, because from a cosmic level, these emperors knew and felt the intrinsic characteristic of what is called this land. It was the land which is known as an energy center of the whole world. Now, who can handle it? Only someone with an intense desire to receive that energy could be matim, could reconcile themselves with this kind of country. So it was called the land of Israel, not because it's been promised. We're the only ones who can handle it. We're the only ones who have the capacity not to be burnt out, provided we are the proper channels. The proper channeling is like Moshe. There's got to be that sharing concept, which is so overwhelming over the intrinsic characteristic of the desire to receive for oneself alone, which is the character, the unique character of the Jew. And that's why the minute nations or empires of history have touched or set their feet on the soil of Israel, what happened immediately after? Downhill, to the extent that Rome became a city, Persia became a little country, Rome became a city, England became a little island in that North Sea of England. All of them, Turkish Empire, became a little country called Turkey. They couldn't handle it. They couldn't deal with it because that's the energy center, and that's a lot of raw, naked energy. And therefore, if, for whatever reason, things are going haywire, even today in Israel, it might be because those people there today can't handle that energy and the kind of strife and quarrel and animosity and hatred that emanates from one session in Parliament, I think should be indicative of how the Jew is handling that raw, naked energy in Israel. So it's called the land of Israel, not because it belongs to Israel as a possession, because within this week's Parsha, again, what does it say? The land eats up. They came back. What did they say about this land of Israel? How did they know, by the way? How did they know? It says it's a land, Eretz Ochelet Yoshveha, he. Also another aspect. They're people of what? Midot? What? Measurements? Or midot? Qualities? I mean, because the land ate them up. They saw this land, and these Canaanites who were there didn't belong there. Why didn't they belong there? Because this is a land that can eat up its inhabitants. What do you mean it eats up? It burns them out. Because if you are there, the energy is there whether you want to draw it or not. It's like the Zohar says about the Zman Yemot HaMashiach, the time of the age of Aquarius. What's happening today? What was unrevealed as enlightenment or as energy, today, says the Zohar, in the age of Aquarius, woe unto those people who will live during this period of the age of Aquarius, and praiseworthy. Well, either or. How could it be both? Either we're lucky to be in this period, or he says, woe unto us for those who are in that period. So which is it? The answer is, says the Zohar, those who can handle the age of Aquarius, those who can handle the age of Aquarius, and it is not by any stretch of the imagination or false explanations of why so much suicide in all parts of the world. Suicide, a new plague, or AIDS, or anything. A lot of stuff is happening. Why? Which had been dormant is now becoming raw, naked energy. And if you can't handle it, like the Jew who is in Israel, and if he doesn't know how to handle it, there's only one way to handle it. Got to be a channel for the energy, and there's only one way to be a channel, and that's to try to, as best or to the degree that is possible, to become a channel for that energy, not become the ultimate I, and it doesn't go further. As a channel, you know what happens when you build up a lot of water and there's no way for the water to get out, ultimately it'll burst. But if it's a channel, if there's a pipe that can permit some of it to go out, which means the sharing concept, if the Jew in Israel or throughout the world could live with that kind of aspect of sharing, like the Persians did at the time of Mashiach, which is the only reason that Mashiach arrived, but unfortunately there were Persians before that period who didn't do the job, who weren't channels, but they were the channels that brought Mashiach. We know that it brought Mashiach. That's why it's the only holiday that will eternally remain. Everything else becomes canceled and nullified. Just Purim. Why? Because they had reached the level of consciousness of Moshe Rabbeinu. Can you imagine people, human beings, achieving that degree of sharing? That's where they were. They brought Mashiach. So that frame, that period in time will never be canceled, because that is the ultimate. So if the Jew can't handle it, he gets burnt out. And that's what's happening in 40 years. What goes on? I mean, you all read newspapers, so we know what's going on. It's only strife and problems. Strife and problems. That's what it means. They saw that Eretz Ochelet Yoshvel. So what did they believe? They knew their own qualities. They knew their own capabilities. They said, in the desert, in Chutz La'aretz, no problem. We can be tzaddikim, but heaven help us if we get to Israel. Over there, it's not the same. Over there, it's serious business. Over there, you've got raw energy, and if you don't know how to handle it. So they were tzaddikim. They foresaw all this. Therefore, Moses also foresaw this. However, does that mean that even these people who were accustomed to outside of Israel, where it was easier, like the non-Jew, we have explained, has less of a problem of dealing with lashon hara, with evil tongue, with the desire to receive, with greed? Why, we think the non-Jew is more evil? No, he's not. If he was, the Torah wouldn't say that he only has 7 mitzvot, 7 conditioning agents. He should have 250, or maybe even 613. Why doesn't he need so much restriction? You know why? Well, for those who learn the Talmud Esesvidot, it's easy. Less desire, less need for restriction. Therefore, the Torah dictated that non-Jews, meaning the ones who are not enveloped in this corporeal matter called desire to receive for oneself alone, which the epitome of which is a body called Jew, outside of Israel, outside the body of Israel, no problems. They weren't tzaddikim. There was no problem being a tzaddik outside. And therefore, the Zohar says they were tzaddikim. They were sharing people. But they figured they're going into another area, another frame of reference. Qualify. Maybe they didn't qualify as leaders. What does it mean? Because leaders in this country requires more than just a little sharing. It required the ultimate of sharing. And as long as the Jew couldn't have that ultimate in sharing, then they would have to be canceled or disqualified from that position. Moses, it says, saw that in advance. What did he see in advance? Did he already dictate? What he means was the fact that they were tzaddikim outside of Israel was no guarantee that in Israel they were going to be the same kind of people. They would undergo a transformation. Why? Because here they dealt with raw, naked energy. And if they couldn't handle it, if they weren't going to raise their consciousness to that supreme aspect of sharing, which is what we hear so little about the Jew, all we hear about the Jew is the troubles that the non-Jew makes for us, the troubles that the non-Jew creates for us, when in essence, he is not the cause. He has nothing to do with the dilemma of the Jew. The dilemma of the Jew is the fact that he was born with this intrinsic characteristic of an extreme greed and negativity. It had nothing to do with it. This is what the Zohar means. Therefore, he sent them. He would not interfere, but what it meant here that they wouldn't be matzliach, that they would not be successful, that if they thought they would go into Israel and being the same tzaddik that they were outside of Israel, they would fail. Because going into Israel required more of that intrinsic characteristic, to have an affinity with the force. Because what's the intrinsic characteristic of the force? One concept, sharing. They would have to be Moses. They would have to be Moses. As leaders, they would have to act as Moses. If they couldn't handle that kind of responsibility, then they themselves knew that they would have to be removed. Why would they be removed? Not because of a political situation. They would fall by the wayside. They would be burnt out. So the Zohar is not even discussing a political situation of where their greed and ego dictated immediately. Who knows? Maybe we go into Israel. Maybe he'll change. Why should Moshe change? What thought came into their head that Moshe, as the Zohar says, Yimneh Roshim Acherim? Why? Ki anu zachinu liyot roshim rak b'midbar, because we were heads of state in the b'midbar. So what? Why wouldn't it carry over? The fact that they were leaders before was no guarantee that they could continue to become leaders. Because there's no other explanation to all that transpired. So Moshe, when he said they were not going to be successful, and the reason he instilled this consciousness of himself into Yehoshua, because he knew that Yehoshua needed that extra ingredient called Moshe. What did he transfer to him? Energy. What energy did he give Moshe? What to Yehoshua? What energy did Moshe transfer? And we have our secret of illness right here. The cure for illness is right here. And it is not by coincidence or by chance that we have that very familiar and short, brief, five-worded, the most brief prayer for cure is in chapter 12, discussing Miriam, discussing Lashon Hara. What did he say? Vayitzak Moshe el Hashem lemor. And Moshe cried out to God, saying, El na refa na la. There are 4 words with 2 letters in them, and 1 word with 3. It is the shortest prayer that can be found in any part of a prayer book or in the Torah. The shortest prayer.
Praying is anyway, it's related to the Malach Raphael.
Right. That's why. So, when Moshe was transferring energy, what does it mean? What was he transferring? He was injecting Yehoshua with that additional ingredient that would be necessary in Israel. More sharing. Sure, you can be a sharing individual outside of Israel. In fact, I could say we are the only ones in Israel. I don't want to give a plug for the center, but I say that the center has to live up to what we teach. We are the only organization that refuses to take any money from the government. Because maybe the time has come when in Israel they should say not what the government can do for me, but what I can do for the government. That's something unheard of in Israel. Or even here. I mean, every politician has to supply some funds to keep himself going. There, the concept of sharing back to the government does not exist. It's what the government can do for them. And therefore we're the only ones who would survive if the government cut off subsidies. We're the only ones who would survive. It is because that's our teaching. It doesn't make us better or for worse, but it's the only way we can maintain that connection with that country. So we're selfish. Or maybe we're smart. This is what Moshe saw, that the guarantee of being in the wilderness as Tzaddikim was no guarantee of what happened when they came to Israel. And so they returned. And what did they say? Lashon hara. What does it mean, Lashon hara? They connected with the illusion. Total illusion, which is evil. Which is evil. The Lashon hara was only the byproduct. They did not, and they could not, maintain that level of consciousness that was required, meaning sharing. Therefore, only through sharing do you achieve that kind of awareness. And since they did not achieve that kind of awareness, they could only relate to one aspect. What was that? The illusion. The illusion where good and evil prevails.
Didn't they know that they cannot cheat?
What's that?
Didn't they know before that they cannot cheat? They were still cheating themselves. They were.
No. When you're into an illusion, it's totally right. Remember we said about good and evil? It's good. And yet everyone around you could say it's evil. But he says it's good. We all talk ourselves into things that may not really even exist. And yet this is the power of illusion. And this power of illusion is more so in Israel. And that's why there's such dilemma. That's why there are so many solutions to all of the problems, and not one has worked yet. All right? Then what happens?
30 parties. So they have 30 parties.
Right? I'm surprised they don't have more. Vatisa Kolaida, they came back with this report, bad report. In other words, that they remembered the day before that here was the strongest kingdom that ever existed in this physical corporeal world, the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. There was no greater power before other than the Tower of Babel, which actually was an incarnation back into the period of the Exodus. So it was the same period over again. And after the destruction or the end of the rule of the Middle Kingdom of Egypt at the time of the Exodus, there would never again be that kind of kingdom to rise and perform the kind of feats and metaphysical powers like mummification, which was never again duplicated, and controlling the world, but not controlling the world with armies. The nation of Egypt did not control the world by virtue of their military might. It was the metaphysical powers that they ruled over all peoples of the world. They didn't have to send an army like Israel has to send the army into every section of which they want to control. Or if the Turkish Empire or the Persian Empire wanted to control, they had to send soldiers to control the areas, or the Romans sent soldiers to control Israel. Not the Middle Kingdom. From a metaphysical, cosmic energy channel, they rule the world. And that came to an end. Now, if that kingdom came to an end, what kind of a report are they coming back with? You know who's there? Giants. Did they forget already what happened yesterday? It's incredible. Illusion. Illusion says that yesterday did not exist, nor does tomorrow exist. Now begins. And what does it say? And all of the congregation of Israel raised their voices, and they began to cry that night. And it continues. And they complained about Moshe and Aaron, all of the nation of Israel. And they said, what is the difference if we died in Egypt or we died here? Why have you brought us here to this land so that our children, our wives, Yelevaz, will become canceled out, become nothing? Halotav lanu shuv Mitzrayma. How better it could have been had we returned to Egypt. Vayomri isha lachiv nitna rosh v'nashuv Mitzrayma. Let's go back. We don't need this leader called Moses. He serves no purpose. Let's go back. Incredible. Incredible story. This is a real interesting Bible. Right? And Moshe and Aaron fell on their face, and Yeshua and Caleb ripped their garments. And he begins pleading. He begins pleading here for the Jews. He begins pleading. God says, I'll smite them down immediately, and I will make you for a goy gadol. I'll make you, and from you shall evolve the great nation of Israel. What does Moshe say? Vayomer Moshe al Hashem. But you know what? V'shoma Mitzrayim. The Egyptians that we left, that place we were there so many hundreds of years ago, which was actually only just a year ago. They shall hear that you brought out these Jews with all of your might. And what happened? They died right here. And how did you bring them out? With the cloud, the pillar, by day and by night? Vehimeta in chapter 14, verse 15. And what did you do? As one people, you slaughtered them. Talking to God. And you slaughtered them.
It's bad PR.
What's that?
Bad public relations.
Bad. Right? And he goes on to pray for the Jew. And he goes on to pray for them. He says, forgive them. This is chapter 14. And what does Hashem say? Salachti kidvarecha. So he didn't kill him immediately. Let him live until the end of the 40-year period, because none of these people entered the land of Israel. But let's keep them going for another 40 years. I don't know why.
But they created another generation.
What's that?
They created another generation. Would
Yes.
have killed them right there and then.
They would. That's correct. Okay. But what is Moses trying to say with bad public relations? Is that the reason? Right? Bad publicity.
Trying to outsmart Hashem.
That's what it seems to. Like the Creator couldn't think about that it might be bad publicity, right? Along comes Moses with his genius and presents, a Madison Avenue plan.
No, because they're discussing two different levels at the same time, the illusionary one and reality one.
Very beautiful, George. Yeah. But before that, I want to go back to, you remember when they said, come on, we're getting fed up with all of this manna business. Give us some of the meat that we were used to, right? Now you're just giving us manna from heaven. You know how the novelty wears off so quickly, and you still want us to stick with it. We need a change, right? And of course we then read about Vayitzak, and he says, well, let's get rid of him again. And what happens over here? Because they said, if you remember in chapter 11, verse 5, Zachalnu et adagash anochav Mitzrayim. Here they didn't ask for meat. I'm sorry. They asked for the fish that they tasted in Egypt, right? And everything. I'm sorry. In verse 13, I thought so. They said, Me'ayli basar. Where am I going to get meat for these people, right? And in chapter 11, verse 15, it says, 14, Lo uchal onochi levadi laset et kol hamazeh. These people are too heavy for me. Moshe's giving up. He didn't say that after the story of the Meraglim. Here he says, I'm giving up. Why here is he giving up? And here, which actually brought about the destruction of that total Dor Deya, the enlightened generation, here he didn't say, I'm giving up. He prayed for them. But there are two different situations. Furthermore, this may come to you as a shock, but some of you, I believe, have heard it before. In our own times, we have experienced, that is most of us, beside maybe Jonathan, have experienced the Holocaust. And the name of these people are well known to the entire civilization. They had a name. Did you know where that name came from? Nazi, right? That's what they call these people. You know where the name came from? You think it's exclusive for the Germans? I don't know. What?
They were nuts.
Well, I don't want to go into that part. But, and I'm looking for that word. And at the end of Beha'alotcha, I believe it is, or for whatever reason, it escapes me for the moment. No, it is in Shlach Lecha. He calls these people, he says, Niatzi. These people are always, shall I say, paining me, but the word is Nun Aleph Tzadik Yud. That's exactly the way you would spell the word Nazi in Hebrew. Now, I'm not creating some mythical idea surrounding, and I can't leave you, although we just have a few moments, so even if we don't get it within the tape, unfortunately, those people, but it is in this, and it has a reason why it's escaping me for the moment, but you will not leave here tonight without my giving you the...
Who does he call Nazi?
What's that?
Who does he call Nazi?
The Jews. The Jews. These Jews we're talking about now. All right? That's right. Right. Where? Yud Aleph. In Beha'alotcha. Pasuk Yud Aleph. Perek Yud Dalet or Perek Yud Aleph? Yud Dalet. That's where I'm looking. You say Yud Aleph. All right? Okay. No, that's the first time he uses that word, but that is not exact. Yena Atsuni. Okay? Yena Atsuni. Yom Hashem al Moshe. Ad anai yena Atsuni Amazah. Until when will these people be Na'atsuni? But that has like a little nun and yud at the end. I'm looking not for that word. I'm looking for the word which is a little further. But anyway, there is the word mentioned there. Yinatsuni. But I'm looking for Na'atsi. Just like that. A complete word. It should be right here. Because Moses is saying, how long, as we quoted in chapter 14, verse 27, until when? Le'eda hara hazot, these evil people, until when? When will they stop complaining? And it is shortly after this, and I wish I could give it to you right now, and I'm going to try.
Does it mean that?
But the word is exactly. That's right, menatzai. That's right. It's in this chapter, but I guess there's a reason why I shouldn't quote it for you.
Does it mean that the Nazis were?
But in any event, this seems to be the description of how the Torah deals with them. Now, I know this is not pleasant. And this session here this evening is not to make things unpleasant. However, I think the time has come when we must recognize what is going on. There must be some necessity for change because we've got a bad track record. I'm talking about the Jews in the world. Because if it's a bad track record for the Jew, it's a bad track record for the whole world. No one escapes the evil of Holocaust. No one. Now the difference, as I said before, he was giving up and here he didn't give up, right? Because here he's talking about Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara on the land. There Moses knew that he had to intervene because Lashon Hara, says the Zohar, and we have no time to quote it, nothing, no tshuva can help for it. Sounds awful. Sounds awful. He says everything else, adultery, murder, you name it, the real juicy ones, right? You can do tshuva, you can repent. On Lashon Hara, the Zohar says you can't. And therefore, when he was pleading here, and there he said, look, get rid of him already, I can't handle it. He was not talking about Lashon, he was talking about the minimal stuff, greed. What are you doing for me today? The manner is out of style. Let's get a new style in. All of these things. You see, he says, look, if that's where they are already, forget about them. But when they came into this aspect of Lashon Hara, if he didn't intercede, it would have been all over. It would have been all over. That was the essence of what happened. You found it. That's right. What pasuk? What? 23. It's a very long. That's right. Here it is. It's in Torah. Where does he say it? First of all, even before that, it says in verse 14:22, all of the people have seen the Creator is pleading with Moses. Haven't they seen all of my wonders, the miracles that I did in Mitzrayim and in the wilderness? And they have always proven me, meaning, come on, not enough. Show me what else you can do, Creator. Are you gonna stop right there on your old laurels? You gotta produce every day, you see. Every time we want new miracles, then we'll know you're really around. Im yiru et ha'aretz asher nishbati lavatam. And if they will see, this is where the condemnation took place. If they will see the land that I have promised to their forefathers, V'kol mena'atzai lo yira'uha. Although mena'atzai, exactly the word, all those who come from na'atzai shall never see the land of Israel. Good night.
Does it need to be